Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Worth the Hype, right? So we have seen initial response for the Longines Spirit Flyback Pilot, the new release in October 2025 from our latest Shorts Hot Takes, which was actually released today as of filming, right? So guess what? We are up late night right now. It's like almost 1 a.m. in Singapore. And we're doing this for you, right? Recording a episode of With the Hype on the latest Longines release, right? So let's dive straight into it, right? As per usual, we'll give a quick summary at the start. And here are the stats, right? So it's not the first flyback that Longines have, but this new iteration, it has slimmed down tremendously, right? The case mid diameter of 39.5 and a significant thickness reductions down to 13.4. That's the exciting point that we're going to talk about a lot for today, right? It's a hand-wound movement, a ETA that's exclusive to Longines, and it's COSC certified as well, right? It comes in both bracelet and strap. Which we'll also talk a lot about it as well. So yeah, basing on the pricing, it's about 5.5K US dollars on the bracelet and 5.35 on the strap. And we don't have any information on the secondary market yet. However, basing on the 42 millimeter version, that's hovering at about 3,000 US dollars, right? Which can expect will probably yield similar results for this too, right? Maybe more, maybe less. Only time will tell, right? Anything you want to add, Woody?
So I think I just want to highlight why this made a mark even to us as enthusiasts, right? Because if you go on the market right now on any of the mainstream brands and look for a chronograph, you cannot find many, if any, that are under 14 millimeters and in thickness in particular, and under a 40 millimeter case as well. Tudor doesn't have one. Rolex is the only exception. Zenith is one of the few that has it. But if you then look at anyone else, you think of a Breitling. You think of a Breitling. I think the smallest you get is a 41 millimeter Navitimer that runs up to nearly 14 millimeter plus thickness as well. Tag Heuer, another one that will naturally operate close to 40, but then also operates on a near 15 millimeter thickness. So this is why it's exciting to us, right? We've been like harping for a hope that something like this shows up. So this is interesting to us, but we'll discuss more on the other nuances as we go.
Right.
Back to you, James.
Sure. Like I said, there's many more. I think we'll debate a lot in this episode, but let's dive into the scoring, right? Starting on the very first, is it worth it at retail, right? So it is it's not a small amount, and the discrepancy between retail and secondary as well is quite big in terms of the delta, right? If you look at the reference for the 42 millimeter, if you expect the same trend, yes, and typically in that case you would you would see a zero scoring in that sense. However, I think Woody mentioned, the point that Woody mentioned, it's very difficult to find chronograph in a acceptable thickness for some reason, right? And especially for the ones in automatic movement, which I've said it several times in multiple episodes, go manual wound if you cannot get the thickness down to an acceptable level, right? I'm actually in the camp that it's I would pay money to lose out the automatic feature if it means getting into the acceptable level. And also on top of it, you do get several other new goodies from this as well. You do get a bracelet now with micro adjustment. It is a COSC certified movement as well. All put together, if you are looking at brand new, there's very limited or none options available in brand new, right? I mean, in secondary market, yes, perhaps you can find some other manual wound movement, but how many of them are actually COSC certified, brand new with the peace of mind and in a modern build quality as well? There's not a lot of option, right? With that being said, I cannot fault it totally, but I have to also say it is a little bit pricey for the brand and what you get, right? It's an ETA movement at the end of the day. So with that being said, I would have to compromise and give it a 0.5 over here for me. Yep. And over to you, Woody.
So here's the truth. if you are willing to delve into the micro brand space, Selita SW300 modified movements are very similar to what this offers for a lower price. So 5,000 plus is still a lot to pay for. Normally, I would also just rank this as not worth it. But here's the thinking that I have about this. Now, Longines, I'm sorry to Longines fans out there, right? If you're buying a watch from Longines at full retail, you're probably doing it wrong. You're bound to get, even I think if you just wait a few months or so, I'm fairly confident this is the sort of watch that you will be able to negotiate a discount of some kind from the retail, right? So if I were to factor the fact that you probably can get a discount for this watch, so that would bring it maybe, even if you get a 10%, it's about 5,000 US dollars, right? What can you now get as a mainstream brand chronograph at this sort of proportions? Nothing comes to mind because everything else that falls within this spectrum, if you talk about the Omega Speedmaster, it's operating at about 6 to 7,000 US dollars now. I think the Tudor chronographs as well are perhaps very similarly priced or slightly more, but again, not to the same level of proportions, right? And everything else doesn't really operate at this price range anymore. So I don't think it's affordable in any which way or form. Affordability sits in micro brands. I'll still give it half a mark because it's the whole package that you're looking at right now, right? If you want peace of mind, you're not really a full-on enthusiast delving into micro brand space. I think this is something worth considering. So half a mark from me as well. And I think it's worth looking at. It's not very common. I'm quite excited as a chronograph fan to see something like this in the market. Back to you, James.
Right. Actually, I just remember one point, right? When we are talking about the criteria of is it worth it in retail and is it worth it in the secondary market, we don't mean it as a form of investment, as in that you buy it and then you're able to sell it. So because there's actually a comment that's being placed in YouTube that says that watches aren't for investment, which is true, right? If we're looking at investments and so on and purely looking, we will not be talking about watches. We'll probably park our money elsewhere, properties and other places. But we're talking about, I think we're coming from it as um, a average Joe trying to enjoy the watch hobby as responsible as possible, right? Yeah, I mean, if you are able to afford it, and you have tons of disposable income, then yes, for sure, you probably don't need to look at the first two criteria that we're talking about. Is it worth it at retail? Is it worth it at secondary market? It's probably irrelevant to you. Just buy and look at the spec sheet and just enjoy the watches. But uh, we know, at least in our circle, or at least the watch community that we've been with, it, we aren't able to just buy any other pieces or any number of pieces in every single year, right? We have to limit ourselves, and it's typically tied to X amount of our net worth. And that's a responsible way to enjoy it. And therefore, this criteria is actually important for those who look at it in order to maximize the amount of collections that they can add in, right? Without being irresponsible, right? So I think that's where Woody and I are coming from. Therefore, we decided to add these two criteria, and we believe that this is relevant to our audience as well, right? Yeah. Anything you want to add on this, Woody?
I think it's very simple, right?
Yeah.
Enjoying it responsibly is if you buy it, you don't want to feel like how you normally would feel if you buy a car. You buy a new car, you know immediately after that you lose a lot already, right? So how we're just going about it is if the retail price is fair and then that delta that you might lose doesn't feel as painful as an owner, and you still get a joy out of experiencing. And the other thing that I also apply is comparing to the market, right? What else you can get if you like that sort of watch, whether you can get it for that sort of price. That's the framing that we think about. It's not an investment, definitely not. Please put your money elsewhere. I would highly encourage, don't even come into the hobby if you're thinking about investments. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I think for a last piece of note as well, for those who are looking at investment, just look at what happened in the COVID bubble, and then that will probably make you think twice, right? But yeah, I think that's all we need to say on this. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next criteria, right? Is it worth it on the secondary market, right? So if it trends according into the 42 millimeter reference, and if you're able to get it down to 3,000, let's just say even 3,500, or even 4, which you get a 1,500 bucks off of the RRP, that's a big discount to consider, right? And if you are what's that? If that is the amount of budget that you could only shout off for this watch, I would probably advise you to wait and see how it goes. Um, it's likely, more than likely, going to be the case. My guess would be hovering around the 3,500 to 4,000 range of US dollars, and you're able to score a really, really, really good deal on a great watch as well, right? I think this again and again we've mentioned it. The person who buys a Longines is probably going to be a watch enthusiast anyways, right? Especially for a Longines Pilot Flyback Chronograph, right? So you're probably going to get a watch that is well taken care of. At least you have the history of service and yada yada that comes with it. You're going to be able to score a good deal. However, how many of those who are able to go into the market, that's remain to be seen. But yes, long story short, if you're able to find one at a good discount at a price range of 3,500 to 4,000 US dollars at a secondary market for what you get, the whole entire package with the micro adjustments, with the ETA cost certified movement, the chronograph with such thinness, with a very great break as well, right? Which I'll talk about it in the wearability and aesthetics. I would say definitely go for it. I highly recommend it if you're able to find the right price at a secondary market. So it's a full one from me over here. And over to you, Woody.
So the secondary market for Longines, it's not great. What I mean to say there is you're going to get good deals on secondary market. Longines is one of those brands where the price doesn't hold very much. And so it's not surprising on two factors why you get even almost like 50% off on the previous version. One, I think Longines actually suffers from being in the stable of Omega under the Swatch group. There's a premium separation that needs to be there for Omega, right? So Longines, the sad thing for me is I actually really, if you look into the history of Longines, Longines is as historic a movement maker, chronograph maker as Omega is. But because they have to create these price separations, Longines hasn't been able to operate at that level. So it doesn't hold its value. And as a result, you will see big drops there. The other thing to note about, and this is a specific nuance to the 42 millimeter flyback, right? It is a beast of a watch, like 42 millimeters, and don't get me wrong, 17 millimeters thick, right? Automatic movement, no doubt, but it's huge. So I suspect that's the reason why you can get it at 50% the retail price. I am in the same camp as James. I think the price will drop and it will hover around 30% to 35% lower than its retail. And that's where you will find where the market will eventually settle. I'm purely speculating now. I also am hopeful that's not true. Because if there's one range of Longines that I think can help them lift themselves out of the doldrums of being in the shadow of the other Swatch group brands like Omega, right? This is one of the few that deserves to be there. So having said that, factually, I do think you're going to be able to score this if you give it a bit of time, 2 years from now or whatnot. Generally, it's a small market, small interest group as well. But you get the peace of mind with the fact that it's usually warranties are well serviced by a brand as prominent as Longines. So full marks from me, from a secondary market perspective, on the basis that you're able to trend downwards on the price. If we end up both being wrong about this and it holds its value, then maybe we are in the wrong with this particular score.
Mm-hmm.
But the gut feeling tells us it's probably going to downtrend the same way.
Yeah.
Back to you, James.
Yeah. So before we move on, right, I like to further emphasize this as well. I think as watch lovers or someone that really appreciate horology of it, we actually would prefer that inverse results, right? I think we would actually like the value that actually ties into the innovations and to the movements and to the makers that actually churn great watches out versus just different colored dial like Rolex and so on, right? However, the market is the market. We have no control about it, and people do like things that is flashy and with status and so on. It is what it is. We just have to navigate with how the market reacts to it. And if in case that Longines, this particular watch does perform really well in the secondary market, and people do appreciate the movement and the thickness that was being reduced significantly from the previous iteration. Fantastic, right? I'd be happy to be proven wrong in terms of my prediction. But at least historical trend wise, it doesn't seem to go the case. It tends to go with brand prestigiousness, or at least watches with deep history, a deep story behind, and so on, or something that is more of a status piece, right? But yeah, only time will tell for that. Let's see how it goes. But on to the next criteria, which is aesthetics, right? So aesthetics over here, uh, I think this watch will have quite a lot of different subjective opinion about this. But for me, at least, I absolutely like the sort of the vintage feel of it. One, and second, I somehow dig the hybrid pilot slash diver slash chronograph quirks that they're trying with it. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the bezel with it actually makes the whole watch look smaller. To me, have the right amount of bezel size is not too thick, yet make the dial look smaller as well. It ended up complements each other really, really well. I like the pushers. It's not screw down. And it has that old vintage stopwatch pusher. Everything just works to me, right? But like I mentioned, it's a very highly subjective thing. And I'm typically not a fan of the numerals indices as well, right? However, for this case, somehow it works, right? The balance is just there. The two sub dials just fit right in. Just everything just looks really nice to me, right? Um, Perhaps if anything that I would change is that I would rather they go either full Fotina or no Fotina. Right now it's a little bit of a mix. So it's kind of like there's Fotina in the dial itself, but on the bezel there isn't. So that part is a little bit weird to me, but it's very much at the acceptable level. So over here, I give it a full one. For me, it's very, very much towards my personal liking. Over to you, Woody.
Okay. I like the fact that you talked about the mix of it, and the first watch that came to mind is the Nevada Grenchen. I think it's this. It's like Chronomaster Aviator C something, right? It's like the whole mix bag of everything, right? Now I like the idea that I like the functionality, and I like that there's a bezel that actually works. And you are absolutely right about the balancing out and all this. But I have this. I'm guess I'm at this place in my watch enthusiasm journey, right? Where when it's missing a little bit of je ne sais quoi, right? A little bit of special, right? I find it boring. It's just a little bit boring. Um, I am actually hopeful that I'm in the minority of this because everything else is done really well. I'm hoping that this watch gives Longines the Black Bay 58 moment that Tudor had, right? And to your point, James, Black Bay 58 went all in, right? The first iteration, they went Fotina all the way. Bezel, red dot, the dial, the hour markers, everything. This one is a half and half. It makes me wonder if perhaps you're saving it for later because it's the easiest thing to do to add color to this, right? So here's the thing. I think it's a very well executed balanced style. I wouldn't say it wears well. I think it makes the bezel does make the dial a little bit smaller, and that creates that bit more balance because if you have all dial, it tends to be a pretty big piece as well. And here's the other thing that I'm also thinking about when it comes to the entire package. I think when they come around to doing what they did exactly with the other flyback chronographs, right? When they come up with the blue, when they come up with the green, when they come up with all of that, I will tip my score of half now to be a 1. I just find the whole black gilt look it's a bit boring. And I'm just in the face of and this is a biased view anyway, because this is all subjective, right? I find this one of those watches, it's the same problem I have with the Black Bay 54 and 58, right? It's like, yes, it works, it's versatile and whatnot, but my goodness, if I'm going to put something on the wrist, I want something interesting at this stage of my collecting journey. So that's where my bias kicks in. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. On to the next one, right? Horological features, right? So over here, I think just basing on the fact that this is a exclusive ETA movement to Longines, whether they've done some work or what, but they're all in the same group anyways. And the fact that you went from a shaving of 4 millimeters in thickness, that's impressive, right? I mean, like, I'm not sure how many of it's attributed from the removal of automatic to hand wound and so on. I probably need to see actual like stats of that, right? But I think that's great. It's cost certified. On top of it, they added the micro adjustments, which really, really helps in terms of variability. And we mentioned as well, I think anything that comes in under the improvements of innovations and what all tags under horological feature itself, um, I think that very much deserve points, right? Even though yes, you can say that yeah, it's only thinner because they just drag in a new ETA movement and then make it exclusive to Longines. Because it's thinner because you went from automatic to hand wound and so on. Yes. You can also argue the point if you were to go to the other direction. Therefore, I once again compromise and end up having a zero 0.5 over here for me. But yeah, but very much, I still have to give credit where credit's due. I do think that's a great move from the company. And for those watch nerds out there, would very much notice all this key nitty gritty that was added into the watch, right? But yeah, so that's my justification for this. Over to you, Woody.
Yeah, so Longines is one of the few brands that's under Swatch, and therefore the entire without going into the whole history, right? The reason why you no longer see ETA movements outside of Swatch is because Swatch owns the entire ETA movement makings. And when they stripped that away, the only people that could do chronographs after that were outsourced movers from Selita, and then you had the Seagulls, and of course, those who had their own in-house, they could do it. So there was like a whole vacuum of innovation for a long time, right? So when that happened, it almost became the death knell of chronograph movements. It's like if you're going to outsource it, you're only left with the historical ETA, which is the 7750. And so Selita is the closest you get to it. So the fact that Longines finally brought something like this out of its stable again is a positive. And not only that, most chronograph movements, they don't even bother with the flyback. Now, the flyback is a very simple way of looking at it. Instead of a start, stop, reset, by just one click of the whilst it's running, it flies back to zero and it still continues running, right? It's a little gimmick. It had its purpose in the early days. Most people don't use it anymore, but it's a nice differentiating factor. I also want to point out that you normally for chronographs, and you're left with the Omega, for example, also a manual wound movement. The rest are automatic. But then if you go higher up and higher up in the price range, your Patek Philippe's and whatnot, they end up being manual wound movements again. So I actually don't find it as a drawback too much. But to some of you out there, it might be a negative. So I package it as follows, right? It's a flyback chronograph. It's interesting. It's unique. You don't normally get it at that sort of thickness. And it's also cost certified by a reputable Swatch house brand. So if you're sending it for repair, unlike, let's say, a new brand that you don't know whether 5-6 years down the road, whether they'll still exist or not, this is sort of watch where if 5-6 years down the road, you have to send it back, you know the company is going to exist. So that's the peace of mind, right? It's still what I would consider one of those hidden movements that they've always had, they never just revealed, but they have made modifications to it, I suspect. So it's a half mark for me here as well. I think it deserves it for just bringing all those factors together, which doesn't normally come about in such a package. Back to you, James.
Great. Right. So on to the next one, right, which is wearability, right? So naturally, from going from looking at just the comparison from the 42 millimeter to this shines like tremendously, right? This is like a plus if you just purely look at the comparison between those two, right? However, if we dive in a little bit deeper, I think the main problem that I see in here, at least if I were to start nitpicking, right? The biggest problem is going to be on the end link of the bracelet, right? It has the male end link which juts out, which then makes the wearability of the bracelet a little bit difficult, right? I don't think there's going to be an issue on the one with the strap if you wear it with a strap. Overall, the proportion of it with 39.5 at that thickness looks great, right? And I also want to really highlight the point that they have made uh, tremendous break in between the case. You have the glass, the bezel, the mid case. Even at the bottom part is further, the case back is further breaking down into two portions as well, right? So when you look at it from the side view, it does not look like it's 13 millimeters thick, right? It looks maybe at around 12, right? So that illusion really helps reduce the issue with thickness. And even when it went from 17 down to 13, right? So all this, it's all major plus point, right? Therefore, I was like, do I give it a 0.5 or a 1 over here? However, looking at the lug-to-lug of it, and I'm just looking at the big picture of it and how majority would perceive it, and for myself as well, I think at the size, it just nudges out to the edge and come to a 1 over here for me, right? It almost didn't make it. And for someone that has a smaller wrist size than me, I'm about 6.2, you would probably have issues with it, right? But it just nudges out at the edge that I think is going to be acceptable for majority of the people, right? And because this is subjective scoring, if it doesn't impact me, I'm just going to judge it based on my personal wearability, and therefore I give it a full 1 over here. And over to you, Woody.
Well, I think you've forecasted what I was going to say anyway. So here's the thing. 47.4 is that borderline for most of the tiny wrist tribe. And that's on a strap. So here's the conundrum. It is going to wear pretty well on most wrists, especially the larger folk, you'll have no problems. Tiny wrist strap, here's my warning. You're only going to be able to pull this off most likely on a strap. And as advocates, both James and I will always tell you, buy on a bracelet, right? But that means that you buy on a bracelet and the bracelet's going to sit aside and you're going to enjoy the micro adjust and whatnot. That's a really sad point to the whole thing. But if you wear it on a strap, it's going to wear decently. The whole proportions, it's not as great as the Daytona. I'm not even a fan of the Daytona. It's not great. It's as great as Daytona, but it's going to be one of as good as it gets sort of thing in this current market at this current point in time. So I'm giving it 0.5, half a mark for wearability, only because I kind of wish it was a female N-Link watch. Because if that was a female N-Link watch, I'd be giving this a 1 and say that, it's teetering on the edge, same like how James would have put it. I would have tipped to the 1 instead of the 0.5. But for now, from the tiny series strap perspective, it's only going to work on the strap. So that's my score. Back
Fair
to
enough.
James.
But on that advice, right, Woody, would you still recommend for somebody who was part of the tiny wrist strap to buy it under the bracelet instead of buy it on the strap instead of the bracelet? Because the cost between that is just $150, right? And more likely than not, you will probably not wear the original strap anyways. You're going to get a third-party strap. So would you still buy it? Yeah.
Which is a great point, which is why I said I'm still going to advocate you buy it as a bracelet. Piece of advice to anyone there shopping for watches. If the watch comes with both a bracelet option and a strap option, always pick the bracelet. Even if you don't use it, it's one of those things where you are never going to regret it. Why? Because when you move it on, that's what helps you make a difference in selling it as well. Your strap, you'll wear it to the point where you can't wear it anymore. Whereas in a bracelet standpoint, normally it just requires a little bit of a polish. It freshens up altogether and whatnot. I made the mistake before in my early days where I bought my Zenith on a strap, and I regretted because why did I do that? Eventually, I wanted a bracelet. So bracelet definitely from my end. I would just suggest you buy it. See if you can pull it off. It pulls off, great. If you're not, wear it on the strap, and that's where the 0.5 comes in.
Fair enough. And if somehow the likes of Uncle Seiko is watching this, you know what to do, right? We need a new bracelet for this watch. For the ones, especially us Asians, could very, very much utilize it, and therefore we've already come up with helped you come up with your new line for this. Right? But yeah, if you're listening, you know what to do. But yes, I think that pretty much ends it. And let's sum it up in terms of a 4 for me, a 3 for Woody, and that brings it up to we will buy it. So this is not often you see a watch score that really gets out in terms of to the 7 range, and this is one of the few, right? And this is something that very much got us excited the moment we saw the news. And that's why we released the shot real quickly as well upon hearing the news on that day itself. And looking at the response from the shots we have, therefore we created this. And we certainly hope you enjoy it as much as we do, right? And like I mentioned as well, we are in the process of upgrading in terms of productions and so on. As you can see, Woody for the past several episodes, myself starting from now, and it's still very much work in progress. But yeah, any comments, any critics, or any requests, feel free to continue to plot it into the comments or even DM us directly. We are keeping track on that, and we are hearing you guys out, right? But before we end it, any last word, Woody?
I have a soft spot for Longines chronographs. Fun fact, type in 13ZN in Chrono 24 and look at the price and your jaw will drop if you see any, right? They are genuinely a historic chronograph maker. So I do want a Longines chronograph to succeed. This is the closest they've come. I hope they do well. That's how I look at it.
Fantastic. All right. And that wraps it up for the episode for today. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.